All right, so welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Deppin, and joined today by Melanie Jacob, very active note investor. So how's it going, Melanie?
Hey Dan, good. Thanks for having me today. Appreciate the
Yeah,
opportunity.
yeah, of course. So, I know you're one of the Michigan note investors. So maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit for folks
Sure.
that don't already know you.
Yeah, we live, my husband and I, Phil Jacob and I, we live in Canton. Actually, it's probably maybe 30 minutes outside of the city. It's in a suburb, and we've been investing in real estate notes for about a year and a half. We bought our first note last November, so we're not quite coming up. We're coming up on a year of buying notes. So.
Very cool. And that's Canton, Michigan, not where the Football Hall of Fame is.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, very cool. So today we were gonna, it's gonna be a little bit freeform, but we were gonna talk about deal breakers and things that we run into and due diligence that have caused us to have to walk away from deals after bids.
Yeah,
Can
I find this is somewhat hard because you put so much time and energy and money into some of the deals, and then you just got to go. It's a deal breaker. You realize, what are we doing? We're not doing this. So I think we came across a number of them recently on a larger bid, but I can share at least a couple stories, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've got a bunch too. So, and I know like it's one of my pet peeves as a note investor is all the money I spend on BPOs and O&E reports on stuff that I'm not able to close on. It's really a cost of doing business that I think a lot of people don't realize when they're getting started.
Yeah, yeah.
So cool. Well,
Yeah.
I'll let you start with the first
Okay.
story and we can kind of go from there.
Well, one of the, I'll call this deal the lot line confusion deal in Florida. It was a multifamily unit, and it was a performing note actually in Florida that we looked at. And we got the collateral file, and you could see the map actually on the property. And it was really unclear whether this was an actual CFD on one of the three units or all three. So we actually reviewed it with two different lawyers, and neither of them said it was clear, and they recommended that we would get like a surveyor or something. At that point, how much time, it's like, who owns what? Who owns what? Are we going to buy a CFD that's actually the full three units, or is it actually one of the three, which would be even more complicated? So we felt like it wasn't worth the time or the energy to look. It could have been a great deal, but we just, we actually gave all the results information to the seller, and we said it's not even clear, and they couldn't really give us the information either. So they were, it says unit 1 on the address,
Uh-huh.
and the values look like it was probably on one unit.
Yeah, at that point I put it back on them
Yeah.
to clarify it.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, I had one that was, well, it was a little different than that, but it was a lot line thing where it turned out that the home covered two parcels.
Right.
So the note was on one parcel and on the home, but the home actually spanned, I think it might have even spanned into three parcels. There's two or three. I think it actually might have been three if I remember, because this was back about a year ago. And the problem was, at one point in time, all three parcels were tied to the home.
Right.
But somewhere along the track, the other two dropped off. And one of them, so one of the parcels, the main parcel that the house was mostly on, was owned by the seller. But then it had like this garage overhang and another strip that was technically owned by one of the previous owners of the property. And then there was this third one that it touched on that was owned by like somebody else.
Right.
And I couldn't quite get it untangled. So that was one where I think I technically could have gotten that figured out had I wanted to really try. But the problem is, what's your time worth?
Time.
To do that, for one, and really it's the seller's issue. So I told the seller, like, look, if you can get this untangled, let me know and I'll buy it. So that kind of stuff I tend to push back on the seller, unless it was something that I was just really, really, really dying to get, or if it was like maybe like a really high dollar value deal where it
Right.
justified doing that. But yeah, when I run into stuff like that, then I kind of tend to just move away.
Right.
Because for me too, what I worry about is I worry about making a mistake or missing something or thinking something's going to be okay and then finding out later, no, it's really not.
Well,
So
that's why a lot of this stuff is actually uncovered in the second phase of the due diligence. So you make your bid, you get your bid accepted, and then you start uncovering kind of layers and layers. And the lot line confusion point is one of them that I guess it pushed us over the edge when we found out there was actually a lien on the property, not taking care of the property or something, but it was put on before the seller had gotten the note. So it was the other person's, it's still, again, it probably could be resolved, but it was gaining like, I don't know, like $4 a month or something, or $4 a week or something, gaining and it'd been there for like 3 or 4 years. So
yeah.
we probably uncovered something for the seller.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times you do, right? I mean, a lot
Right.
of times the sellers are, they've got some pool that they're reselling or they're carving off different things, and they don't always know what they have. I mean, sometimes
Right.
they do, but yeah, sometimes they're enlightened as well when you
Right.
things.
Well, what was one of your biggest deal breakers?
Well, for me, one that was more unique for me that I ran into just recently that I talked about in my newsletter was this one on a condo in Florida. So this was one that I was really interested in. It was actually a reverse mortgage. When it was vacant, the borrower was deceased. And they said that they had spoken with the heirs and they were interested in basically cooperating on the foreclosure. I'm drawing a blank on the actual legal term. Still would have had to go through a foreclosure to clear out some other liens.
Right.
But when I was looking at comps in that condo complex in the surrounding area, they were all over the map. So there were ones that had sold for $150,000 to $200,000, and there were other ones that had sold for like $30,000, and there was one for sale for like 25. And
Why would it be such a big range?
well, that's what I couldn't figure out because it really didn't make any sense. But I noticed on a condo that was listed for sale nearby that it said that this was in a country club, gated country club community in Boca Raton. And it said in the thing that it was required to buy a country club membership for 70,000.
Of course,
And so I
70,000.
dug into that and made some calls. And so it turned out if you want to buy a piece of property in this community, you have to join the country club, which costs 70,000, and it's non-refundable. So a lot of country clubs have equity memberships where you can eventually get that back. This wasn't one of those. You were just out 70.
Wow.
And then to buy the minimum membership level was just the social membership, which doesn't even include golf. And that was
And
13.
that doesn't work for you at all. It's
No,
got
that
to include
was
golf.
13,000 a year. I should have asked them what it cost for the golf. I didn't even.
Right.
Probably 30 plus. And then the HOA dues were 2,000 a quarter.
Okay.
So you're in for 70,000 down and 21,000 a year just for anything in there. And the problem was this condo was built in, I believe, like 80 or 81. And it was nice, but it was kind of dated. I mean, it wasn't decent.
Then you're looking at a roof that the whole community votes on to repair, and then you got to put in money for that because it's like, they're putting it on for the whole unit, right? So then you got to put money in.
And the thing is, I mean, those higher end country clubs in South Florida, they're pretty common. There are a lot of people looking to move into those areas. But my thesis is that, a lot of people who are looking to drop 70,000 plus God knows what, 30K a year for a country club,
Right.
probably want a condo that's a couple $100,000 that's a little newer, not
Right.
the lower end one that's from 1981. So that's like an odd mix, right? Like I don't know what kind of buyer wants that combo.
Right.
And so I ended
And
up.
a lot of them have rules, like you have to be a certain age to be there.
I didn't even check that.
Not
But
for everybody.
a lot of them you got to be 55 plus.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or the other one is that you have to have the interview from the people in the community. I think my dad's a snowbird. He heads to Florida every year, and there's all these rules about his condo. So I've been learning it from the backside a little bit here.
Yeah, that makes me think of the Seinfeld episodes with the Boca Vista, where they talk about people work their whole lives so they can move to Florida and then make up these rules for each other. And yeah,
Right, and don't go to the doctor in Florida for sure.
no, that's brutal. So I grew up in Florida, in
Okay.
Central Florida, and that's true. Yeah, there are definitely a lot of. It seemed like there were a lot of bad doctors, and condos can be tough. Like I know my grandmother lived in one before she passed away, and she was a terror. She gave people a hard time for noise, bugs, and whatever. So yeah, there's just boatloads of those folks, with nothing better to do than to
Right. I mean, it's they say it's God's waiting room, but I mean, it's the market in there in Florida has always been good and improving. And so, my dad was like, yeah, I'm going to sell the condo. I said, well, just wait, just wait a little bit. Let's evaluate it. So now I feel like a little bit more educated on, his options.
Yeah, I mean, and I like the area. I mean, I joke about it, but when I'm, at some point I'll be probably one of those old people, in one of those condos running around playing. I definitely play a lot of golf.
Yeah, that's good. You got to get your golf game in. Keeps you young, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so
Or
that would be a
swimming.
unique one for me. I've never, like I said, I've seen like the HOA restrictions and the age restrictions and things like that, but
Yeah.
having to buy into the country club is new. And it's funny because my assistant Sarah had actually called the HOA, and then they started calling me like crazy, asking.
Marketing.
Well, you could tell like they were owed a lot of money, and I think they were hoping like I would be their piggy bank, and I could tell that they were
Right.
going to be even though I could strip out. Well, I didn't get all the way through the requirements. Florida has some special rules, and I don't want to speak to it because I didn't get all the way through that with the attorney. I
Right.
didn't get that far. But most of that stuff I could have stripped away in a foreclosure, but I could tell they were going to be a pain in the butt.
Right.
For sure.
Right. For sure. Yeah, it's really important actually just to reinforce that you have to reach out to your legal team, your lawyer, your advisors, because during the collateral review, you could unturn some things that you don't know as just a typical note buyer you're not going to pick up. I know a lot of stuff's coming up with statute of limitations and,
Yeah.
uh, just each state has its own rules on this. So, yeah.
Yeah, you definitely got to get counsel in that individual state because the rules vary and the rules can adjust over
Right. And
time
change. Right.
as well. So yeah, you've always got to get somebody who does that day in, day out that really knows what they're doing. So like as I tell people, I review enough documentation, I go through enough of these, I get pretty familiar with it, but I'm definitely not an attorney. And it's like I know enough to be dangerous,
Right.
which is a scary place to be in. So I
Scary
always depend
place.
on the attorney to be the final say before I do something.
Yeah, sometimes you don't need an attorney. You just need a good real estate agent to go by and give you some good pictures. So Phil and I had a deal that we were looking at in Flint. At least it's not the only city with the water crisis now. But we everything was looking good, and we had an investor even lined up, and we were ready to like close. And the thing is, we just never got the pictures from the real estate agent, even though she gave us the comps. We had the BPO, but we actually didn't go get a regular BPO from someone out of state who normally gives us the BPOs like Dickey and stuff. So
Right.
we ended up, because the agent said, yeah, I'll go get pictures. I'll give you the CMA, and she was local, but she had gotten sick. So she's like, hey, I got to get you those pictures. I'll get over there today. And we were like, okay, let's just hold up till we get these pictures. Unbelievable. And she made a joke. She's like, yeah, you don't want me to tell you there's two like vacant properties on either side of this house. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So she went over, and here come the pictures. The door was swinging open, tumbleweeds in the house. I mean, it
No.
was like a picture's worth 1,000 words. It was like, what are we doing? The garage door was like hanging off. I was like, well, she said, I didn't go inside to see if the copper was gone. I said, no, that's
No, no,
fine.
no, don't go in there.
It's no deal breaker. So, you just think you're getting everything's lining up. And, that's why I think sometimes we get two BPOs. And I think we should have just went with our typical, get our standard BPO and then get another one from a real estate agent locally.
Yeah, that's a good segue because I just did one, working on one this week where I haven't I haven't declared it a deal breaker yet, but I'm about to. But I got my normal BPO, which came in okay, and then I had somebody go by. Actually, I believe the guy you referred me to. This was one
Oh,
in
right.
Milwaukee,
Yeah, yeah.
and that guy was amazing because he not only took pictures, but he like walked like right up to the house. He took pictures of the power meter. He tried to talk to the neighbors, um, and his idea the selling price was different than the BPO. I had a BPO. I think it came in at like 49,000, which would have been fine.
Right.
And he's saying, the top of the market is 40 to 50 all fixed up. And this thing isn't
Wow.
fixed up. So I'm like, whoa, that's a lot different. And he actually did talk to the neighbors, but the neighbors wouldn't talk to him, because he was asking, like, is this, he couldn't actually ascertain if it was occupied or not. The power's
This,
on.
yeah, that power on doesn't always mean that someone's occupied. So,
And
but
the
this
neighbors
guy
wouldn't
is
tell him
a great
anything.
guy. This guy's a great guy in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
He took pictures close up. He said he's not really afraid.
No, he
So
obviously wasn't. No,
not
because
afraid.
taking pictures of front and behind, and like I said, of the meter. And he tried to talk to the neighbors, but he said the neighbors, asked the neighbors what was going on, and the neighbors wouldn't tell him anything. And he's like, that
Mm,
didn't sound good. So who the heck knows? So I think that one's a deal breaker. Mainly because of his assessment of the value.
right.
I think, and this was one too where it's had some payments in the last 12 months.
Right.
Not much, it's been pretty sparse for a little while. And so there'd be a pretty good likelihood of having to take it back. So if it's worth 40 to 50 all fixed up, and like I said, this thing is pretty far from fixed up, and God knows what's
Right.
going on the
You
inside.
don't know what's on the inside. You really can't
And
tell.
that's not going to work. I could get upside down pretty quick.
Right. Well,
Uh,
this speaks to having friends in the note industry where you can pass on a contact. And, Dan, you passed on a contact for me to get a second opinion of this BPO in Ohio. That was I think it was earlier this year. And the same thing, like the first BPO came from a standard vendor, and I was like, wow, this looks good. But the price per square foot didn't really make sense to me. When you just look at the numbers, you just go, something's not right. So I gave you a call and you gave me a name.
is that in
And
Cincinnati?
yeah, yeah,
Okay, yeah, she's outstanding. Yeah.
yeah. She said, oh, she was like, oh, I know this. So she called me initially and talked to me. She's like, oh, I know this area. Yeah, I live like 7 miles from it. And I was
Hmm.
like, great. She goes, yeah, it's an up and coming area. It should be pretty good. I'll drive over there. So she got me the BPO and pictures, and she said, this is hillbilly heaven. She goes, and I'm a hillbilly, so I'm going to tell you it's hillbilly heaven.
Is that good
So
or bad?
it's bad because she said there's all kinds of junk around the property.
Oh,
She wasn't cared for at all. The actual porch was sort of coming off. And she said that her BPO was like 90,000, almost 100,000 below the original BPO. So
oh,
when you have that kind of gap of BPO, you're just like, okay, even though it's semi-performing, if we have to take this back, it still doesn't make work. It doesn't make sense.
yeah, I don't always do it, but I've increasingly been getting two BPOs. Like I'll
Yeah,
often order one, typically through Dicky, and then usually I'll
yeah,
have somebody on the ground, or if it's a new city, I'll find somebody on
yeah.
the ground.
Hit or miss.
And usually they line up, but I've had ones like that before where sometimes you get these wide gaps,
Yeah,
and it's hard to figure out. Like I had one, I think it was in Canton, Ohio, where I had a wide gap between the two BPOs. And I'm like,
right,
what's going on? So I ended up calling up both of them, and they kind of explained that I kind of went with the lower one because
right.
the lower one had a better story. She said, oh, well, there's a couple of vacant boarded up houses on the street, and she got more into like the neighborhood and the surrounding area and what's going on, and it
Yeah,
made a lot more sense. And
right,
um, and I think in
right.
that case too, if you do get two different ones, you're probably better off erring towards being a little more cautious.
I mean, on the pre-due diligence side, we look at the note pros value for the lowest side. And
Yeah,
we really like to look at that one as the first screen. And we always look at the lowest level value. So I think when you get two BPOs, you got to look at the lowest one, or at least one that seems most realistic.
Yeah, I don't use no pros, but I've got some automation in an Excel file
Okay,
where I tap into the Zillow APIs.
nice.
So I can have a spreadsheet of addresses and pull all the Zillow data, because there's actually a lot of Zillow data that you can pull through the API that it doesn't show on the website.
Oh, Phil is all about this API. He is like researching this for the last like
Oh,
2 years.
I can share it.
He needs to talk to you.
But Zillow will actually give you a middle value, which they show on the website,
Oh, nice.
high and a low as
So
well.
what do you use? What do you use? Use the middle or you use high or low?
It depends. I mean, usually I err towards the low. I mean,
Okay,
usually it doesn't matter too much, because usually if the low is low, the middle's not too far different
right,
anyways. But yeah, I use that when I'm filtering up front, because the Zillow value in and of itself, right, is pretty worthless. I think everybody
right.
knows.
Absolutely.
But I use that as kind of a proxy. So I'm kind of like, well, I know it's probably not worth any more than this,
Right,
and it's probably worth some percentage less. Like if Zillow's saying it's worth 25,000, I'm not gonna touch it
right.
anyways. And so I use that as a filter. And then when I get more serious, I get into getting eyes on it and doing other things to get more of the actual value. I just use it as an upfront
Right.
screen. Yeah.
Have you ever had any deal breakers, Dan, after you actually purchased the note and you got it? I know there's some legal terms in the purchase agreements that you have so many days to, have, if there's any unresolved issues or the collateral didn't come through. Have you ever had any deals that broke after the sale?
No, I mean, I haven't done that. I mean, usually I've scrubbed the collateral pretty well up front.
Right.
And I haven't had any issues with sellers following through. Now I've had ones that were slow. Like I've had ones that took longer than they should have to do the loan transfer.
Right.
And the other thing I've had, especially with like the Window Rock home opportunity CFDs, is I found that they don't send me the hard collateral unless I ask.
Okay. You bet you got to get your hard collateral.
Yeah, I actually had one a while back where I had a folder in my safe for the file, and all the files weren't there, and I thought I had received them, and I couldn't find them anywhere, and I was kind of freaking out. And it turned out that they had never sent them to me,
Ah,
and I was able to get them, and somehow I had spaced that and created a folder. I'm not really sure what the heck I did
right.
there. So I've had issues like that, but I've never had one that I've had to unwind. I had a seller unwind one on me one time.
Okay. Wow.
I actually,
You told me about this one. You told me about this one. Like they sold it to somebody else or something. You
said, so I did all the due diligence. We had the sale agreement. I wired the funds. And then they came back and said, oh, sorry, we messed up. We forgot we had already sold that to someone else.
Oh my gosh. So whose note is it really? The one who sent the money first or the one who actually did all the, oh boy.
Well, what's funny is, to show how disorganized they were, I later got in the mail the assignment and quitclaim deed.
Okay.
And I was like, huh.
So whose property is it really then? I mean, had you sent your money back or then already?
Well, they had already sent my money back.
Yeah.
But then they sent me the papers.
Oh my God.
So if I wanted to really be a jerk, I could have recorded it, right? And it was kind of in mind at that point, other than I wouldn't have had the hard copies. But I, let them know, like, hey, do you want me to mail this back to you, or do you want me to tear it up? And they said, well, no, just trash it. So.
Wow, that's a funny story. Wow.
Yeah. So who the hell knows? But like I said, I'm always suspicious of that stuff. Like they said that they sold it to someone else, but I don't really know. Did somebody come along and offer 5 cents more or whatever? I have no way of knowing that.
Right. Right.
But they're definitely disorganized. They show that. So so it is kind of believable.
Which speaks to us, if we are buying notes, we have to keep our collateral and our pay histories and have really good servicers keep track of all the stuff, because if we want to sell these notes, which we should, when the time comes, guess what? We better have our ducks in a row too.
Yeah, because otherwise no one's going to buy them. And
Right.
You've gotten it reperforming and you're selling the note. You're not selling. If you're selling the REO, who cares? Because that stuff kind of
Right.
fades away. But yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta keep things very clean if you want to.
Yeah. We accidentally got an REO in one of our bids. We didn't filter it. So we bid on an REO, which,
Oh,
it was in one of the flood zones. And so we ended up getting an interior and exterior appraisal. We were open to looking at it if it had, but once we did the rehab costs and estimation, we were like, this is a deal breaker. It was our mistake really in a lot of ways because we didn't do our due diligence, to eliminate the REO.
right. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not clear when sellers send out tapes, whether it's a mortgage or a CFD.
Right,
Like I've had ones where I've been surprised once you get, the hard collateral, it was the opposite of what
right.
I thought. And I've even had ones where I thought I was buying a CFD and it turned out to be a mortgage, which is actually kind of cool. It was actually kind of better,
Nice. That's good. That's a
you know,
benefit.
in some respects. But yeah, you do want to make sure it's not an REO, because I know for me, you always end up with them, and I've got my handful of REOs end up taking up a disproportionate amount of my time, so I try to avoid
Time.
them like the plague.
Right. So I think that's, how much time will these deals take? And if you can figure it out, and you're willing to put the time in, some of them were work, but if you're starting out, I don't really want to spend a lot of my time doing, figuring out fix and flips and supervising teams and things like that. So we've tried to make those the deal breakers before we do get to the bid, before we bid on them. But one slipped in last time, but we tried to we gave it a good try, but the appraisal came back, wasn't worth it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know for me, especially, being in Colorado, none of my notes are in Colorado. If it was in your backyard, it might be a little bit easier.
Right.
But managing REOs at a distance it can be done. It's just a little bit of a challenge. And that's where it's key having the right team on the ground. I mean, back to your point about our realtor in Cincinnati. So I had an REO in Cincinnati, and she was outstanding.
Right.
I mean, she coordinated vendors to do the clean out. While we were going through the forfeiture process, she showed up to court for me. She posted stuff on the
Nice.
floor that had to happen. She got the locks changed. She got it cleaned. She got it sold. I mean, that was like easy.
Amazing.
And then I've got my other, nightmare property in Muncie, Indiana, where I actually think I have the right team now. But that one's been, and that's one as we get into like future podcasts and stuff, I'll do some case
Right.
on that. But I want to wait until I get all the way through that one before I get into the details on that.
Yeah. We have one where it's going to go to foreclosure, and it's in a rural area of Illinois where we have our debt buyer's license, but we got into this one maybe a little bit too eager to get a note and got the wrong note, but it's okay. We got it at a good price, but now we need to find a team in a rural area, which is a little hard. So.
Yeah, it's tough to do. And, like on this one, I thought I had the right team at first, and then, it turned out I didn't. And then, I run into other problems and issues along the way.
I think we need to do a podcast on how to find the team and actually how to vet a team, maybe,
Yeah, that's good. And I mean, at this point, boy, I can't really say that I know how to do that. Right? It's hard to do. I mean, sometimes things seem like they're going to be good, but like for me, you don't really find out until things get going.
Right.
You start doing work. A lot of times things sound good up front, but it can be tough.
Right. Coming from a non-real estate background, I feel like the learning curve on all of the due diligence, all the real estate kind of avenues seems to be a little bit over my head at all times. So I'm constantly learning, and I was just trying to remember, Dan, when we met each other last year, was right about this time? I think we were both in Dallas for was the Quest Expo or the Note Expo. I know I saw you at the Note Expo.
Or maybe it was, because I think I was at the Note Expo last November, but then I was but I think I saw you in Phil at Dallas prior to that. That was in August.
Yeah. So it's been about a year. So we're actually heading out to the Quest Expo next week. So we'll be back
nice.
in Houston.
in Houston this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss it this year. Unfortunately, we were talking about golf earlier, so the club championship at my course is that weekend. So
That's
that
right.
was a deal breaker for me making it to the.
A deal breaker. Yeah. Golf. You got to keep your priorities. You got to keep your whys really clear. So
Yeah, for sure.
I
So
hope you can get up to Wisconsin sometime. For Sand Valley has a course up there.
I
One of
need to
the
check that
courses.
out. I drove through there actually not that long ago, coming back from our road trip to visit
Okay.
in-laws in Michigan, but didn't really spend any time there other than having a dinner in Madison. But that was about, which
Okay.
was cool. We walked around the downtown area and stuff.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was about it, other than just kind of driving across the state. So
Got some good golf courses there.
they do, yeah. Steve Strickerland up there.
All
So
right.
well, cool. Well, I think that's a kind of a good stopping point. So we'll kind of cut it off for here. But Melanie, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Dan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure we'll be doing a bunch more of these as we move along. So
Right. And be sure not to be afraid of the deal breaker and figure it out in your due diligence, or else you might get a deal broke on you.
yeah,
You
absolutely.
buy a bad deal.
All right. So thanks a lot. So that's it for this episode of the No Investor Podcast. We'll see you next time. All right.